a financial services professional with extensive experience in global markets, banking, insurance, and investments. He has held senior leadership roles in trading, treasury management, strategy and reporting, innovation, and digital commerce. He currently heads strategy for Old Mutual Rest of Africa. As a researcher and scholar, his interests include broadly empirical finance, global commodity markets, currencies and related derivatives, futurism and strategy. Well, if you can't pronounce these things, these are really big things, guys. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Wits, a Master's of Finance and Investment from Wits as well, and a bachelor's degree in Commerce from the National University of Science and Technology. He is a member of the editorial board of African Review of Economics and Finance, AREF Journal, a life member of JCI. He's a senator in JCI, and a Mandela Washington Fellow for 2017. He cares about young people, education, and how the power of finance can be unleashed to improve the lives of ordinary people. Ladies and gentlemen, please unmute your mics and let's give a virtual drum roll to this fantastic, great friend of mine and fantastic leader, Mr. Xolani Ndlovu. Go ahead, X.
Thank you very much, my good friend Uno, for the very kind introduction. I just want to test if everybody can hear me okay. Everybody can hear me. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much once again for the very kind invitation to share my thoughts and lessons on leading for business success in this amazing event. And I've been following the event from morning. I was joking earlier with Uno and asking, what is it that am I going to talk about? Because everybody who has been before me has taken away everything I was going to talk about. It is pretty amazing to have been here listening to the sharings of the many amazing leaders that have shared before me. And I'm richer for it. Thank you very much once again, my good friend Uno. And acknowledge I'm seeing a number of people that I really respect, some of whom have been mentors of mine for some time in my own career. It's really humbling to be able to share these thoughts in their presence today with them sitting and listening. So I really appreciate your company. Because of a very, very limited time, I don't intend to make this an extended lecture. I hope that we can use the time that we have together to share some important lessons in leadership in business. Okay, I think there's somebody who needs to mute their mic. If you can help the admin, thank you. So I hope that we can share some very practical stuff that I think Coach before me was saying. You probably have copious notes somewhere in your drawer, having been to several symposiums in your career or in business, because these things are everywhere. Or you have a bunch of books written about leadership, and there is hundreds of them. And you're wondering what's new, what new thing you're going to hear today. Again, it's not in the quantum of the information that you'll be able to get out of here. It's really about that's one thing that you get out of this that you're going to do something about. And in my own journey, progress is made in the margins. It's usually just that one little comment, sometimes not even from the speaker, but from somebody who is in the conference who asks a question or poses a comment. And it could be that comment actually that you needed to make your next leap forward in your leadership journey. So I'd encourage you to be mindful and to be attentive, not only to the speaker, but to the comments and the contributions from the other folks that are in the call, and I think we all stand to benefit from that. And for me, as a presenter today, I also always take something away from just listening to other people's contributions and experiences. So I hope we have the humility to, be open-minded and learn from each other. This is by no means, like I say, a lecture or intended to be an academic treatise that will lead you down some new theory in leadership. It's probably things that you can relate to, things that you've seen before, only said by somebody who has had a very different experience from yours. So I hope that helps us to, put context to that, what we're going to talk about today. So moving on, again, I didn't want to kill you by PowerPoint, but I organize my thoughts better when I put them down in some PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and we're going to move to talk about the first principles in business leadership. Again, they're probably a bigger universe of them out there, and they deserve a session on their own. But I've just picked a select few to position what I'm going to talk about today, and hopefully they're beneficial to somebody. And I'm going to talk about some business lessons that I've learned myself in leadership. Hopefully as well that you pick one or two that will work for you. And I'll be glad to hear back from you about what you did with those things in your own journey. So we'll conclude by just looking at some of the youth reading, some of the books that I refer to there as stuff that I'm going to talk about in the main content of my presentation. I do encourage my mentor back in the day used to say, leaders are readers. And it's very easy, by the way, to tell, well, he used to say that to me then, that it's very easy to tell the difference between somebody who's presenting and they're well read, and somebody who is making conjecture and just plain sweeping statements. So he encouraged me to read then. Leaders are readers. And if you're not in the habit of reading, I encourage you, you are only richer for it. Okay, so let's cut to the chase. I hope that we close this in the next maybe 35, 40 minutes, so we can leave time at the end for interactions. But please do feel free to interrupt me as I speak, and to use the chat function to share comments, reactions, and questions. And by the way, if you have any contribution or an answer to the questions that are being posed, please feel free to share your own thoughts about those questions as well. We are richer for it. Now, let's cut to the chase. I thought in the intro, I'll just introduce a bit about my own leadership journey. So in my reflections, and by the way, I care very much about the subject of leadership because for many reasons, one of which is human progress. I know progress as a collective, if you look at time immemorial from where we came from, it is been the work of leaders that moves humanity forward or backward for that matter. So it is a subject that I don't look at very lightly. And, when I reflect on my career and right now, my current occupation requires me to think deeply about what moves our businesses forward, what will, make sure this business is here in the next 100 years, what we need to do now. And that is an exercise in understanding what leadership role, what leadership plays in this whole equation. So it is a subject that I care very deeply about. And if you like, I'm a student of leadership. I learn from great people all the time. And I do try to, read as widely as I can as well to understand what other people's experiences have been. So my own introduction today is actually in the lens of my own leadership journey. So if I look at myself, I've been described in different ways. I think from my introduction, you can tell from my good friend Uno, I come across, I think I would characterize myself as an empiricist. That is, I prefer evidence-based stuff. So I don't necessarily connect with sweeping statements and generalizations. So I prefer stuff to be evidence-backed. I prefer stuff to be data-driven, which is these days. So the decisions that we make, I I'm a sucker for people to show me the evidence and what the data is telling us before we arrive at certain conclusions. And I think from my profile, you heard that I've read for a PhD, and it is itself, I think the paper, my thesis is itself an exercise in empiricism as well. So I characterize myself as that. I've heard people describe me as a realist as well. So I prefer to sift fluff from reality. And life in general itself is full of a lot of fluff. And if you're not careful, you might be fooled into staying with fluff and forget that there is actually the real stuff that moves the stuff. It's usually the 80-20 principle. Stuff that you see, 80% of it is fluff, 20% is real stuff that will give you 80% of the result. And by the way, that Pareto rule, we can talk about it some other time. It applies in every facet of our lives. So I've been characterized that way. And I would characterize myself also as a student of life in general. So I learn all the time, and I always try to listen to other people's experiences and learn from there. The other thing about me in my leadership journey, for those of you who know me personally, that I was the firstborn in my family. And I started taking off leadership responsibilities at a very young age. I didn't know what that was leadership. So, so by some stroke of genius later in my life, I actually figured that being firstborn is itself a calling into leadership. So you direct things, and in some cases, we call our daughter the deputy parent in our house because she has to demonstrate that leadership and to be called to lead her siblings or her sibling at the stage. That has been, and it has made an impression in my life as well. Through high school, I have had various leadership of primary school, high school, I've had various leadership positions as well. So if I reflect on all of them through university, there are important lessons that I've learned from there. And the amazing thing is that the lessons are consistent. It doesn't matter whether you were a high school prefect or a head boy or head girl. The demands of leadership in that role are precisely the same as what a CEO of a listed company in the JSE would need to succeed, or a director of a multinational civic organization would need. So I have had the fortune of being involved in some leadership of role of some sort through my high school and university. And again, I would caution everyone, I'm aware that there could be a few that have done a thesis in their lives. Putting together a PhD thesis over 5 years is itself a test of leadership. And if you're not good at leading yourself and your supervisor and other parties involved, it's probably, that's why many walk out of the university empty-handed. So that tested me as well. So you find that the stuff I'm going to talk about is linked in a way to my own experiences through my education, life in education. And then in corporate, I've had the fortune of working for two very different businesses. So first of all, I worked for an entrepreneur and a vibrant, firebrand, amazing guy at the time. And most of you know the revered Nigel Tanakira and how he started Kingdom Bank. I had the fortune of working for him in my very first job and for the first few years of my career. And most of what I became and my own views in life were shared by Nigel and the work that he was trying to do there. And credit to him because he has never stopped inspiring me and helping me in my own leadership journey. So I worked for an entrepreneurial, if you want to call it a startup business in the early days of my career. And it made such a significant difference, so much that my undergraduate dissertation was actually written as a case study of Kingdom Bank. And I keep looking back at it because I kind of codified his own journey and the others' journey of Kingdom into that thesis, which is pretty a very personal one. So I had that fortune. And then when I moved from there, I had the fortune of working for a 175-year-old financial services business. And the founders, as you would rightly imagine, there have been generations and generations between the founders and what the business is today. So I've had the opportunity of working for what I would characterize as a legacy organization. So I saw leadership work at entrepreneurial level. So to say, what does it take to succeed as an entrepreneur? I have almost seen what it takes to succeed for a business which is so far away from its founding days and is matured and endured through more than nearly two centuries. And that requires some level of special, skill and ability to have managed the business through the different challenges for that long. So that is my corporate journey, and you see that weave into what I'm going to share with you today. I've been involved in civil society, and if you've listened to my profile, I've been involved in leadership in junior chamber nearly all my youthful years, and I've learned a bunch of lessons from there. I was very fortunate in 2017 to be selected into the Mandela Washington Fellowship, like my friend Uno and Chew spoke earlier, and I learned a bunch of stuff from that experience as well. I've been involved in other, foundations in the side. I sit in different boards of charity organizations and stuff, and help to shape their strategy. And finally, one of my biggest roles in recent years have been being a family man. Being a father to Xolani and Ndlovu is a full-time job and a full-time leadership role. So if you like, so if you're a family guy and leading a family, you know that I actually should have put this right at the first, because my first full-time job is being a dad, and I do the other stuff part-time. And that in its own is serious leadership and requires some serious leadership for these people that I lead to follow me. So I'm continually being challenged to get better, because who they become eventually is related directly to the kind of leader that I am. And to every father out there, actually, the contribution that you can make to society is to lead your kids well, because whoever they become and turn out to be in society is directly related to what they learn from you as the leader, full-time leader in the home. So, well, that's a subject for another day. So having said that, let's move on to what I term the first principles of leadership. So again, I'm aware that you probably have a whole bunch of these things in your drawers and books, but if you are in doubt about anything, and one thing I've learned personally is that if you're in doubt about anything, always ask yourself, what are the first principles that govern a particular phenomena? It's always easier to revert to first principles. It's always easier to then make sense of what is going to happen next, or what will logically happen. And COVID, for example, has pushed us to question a whole lot of conventions that we've heard for many years. It has questioned us to question, it has led us to question, even the hierarchy of nations, of who are the powerful nations and who are the weaker ones. It does look like the weaker ones are actually doing better than the traditionally strong ones and stuff like that. Now, if you're in doubt and confused, my own default is to default to first principles of what really runs things. So if you're in doubt about leadership, and I know that there's many theories that have been propagated and propounded and are being fronted everywhere, let's revert to the first principles themselves. So perhaps we can pick something there that will help shape your own leadership journey and those of others around you. So I'm going to share a few of them here. And if I spend more time here, please understand that I'm very passionate about the subject of first principles on any phenomenon. That's how I best try to understand how life works and how, why human beings behave the way they behave, for example. So let's start off with the first one. So what exactly is this phenomenon called leadership? It's a whole bunch of definitions that have been, put out there. And as some of you would know that I sometimes, teach at MBA level, and we're training these top leaders from startup entrepreneurs to managers in big businesses. And there is almost always, an inordinate number of definitions of leadership, depending on who you're talking to. So, but at its very first level, leadership is about organizing the factors of production towards a particular outcome. And basic elementary economics, you remember the factors of production that include capital, that include land, that include machinery, and all those sort of things. The other important factor of production is called labor. And by labor, we are talking here about people. So, and this is the factor of production, the only factor of production that is emotions and feelings. Leadership is about organizing all factors of production and this particular factor of production that is emotions toward a particular outcome. Now, in the final analysis, what exactly is leadership about? It is essentially about people. Where it starts and where it ends, leadership is about people. Where it starts and where it ends and everything in between is about people. And there's a popular statement out there by John Maxwell that says, if you think you're leading but no one following you, then you're just taking a walk. And it's infinitely true. Leaders have followers. If you thought you were one, look behind you. If there's no one following you, you're just taking a walk. There is a point that Simon Sinek makes that there's two classes of people. There are those people, there are those who lead, and they are leaders. The others who lead by virtue of the positions that have been given to them, but really no one is following them. And then we have leaders. They might not have the hierarchical position, but they have a following. And as a trick, if you want to really succeed in the corporate world, it pays healthy dividends to spend some time to really understand who is leading and who is the leader in any particular establishment. You will do well to understand that dynamic and be clear who exactly is the leader and who is the one who leads. The leader is probably the guy who will make things happen because he has a following. And it might not be the boss. It might not be the guy at the top. It might be some old Madala who is right at the bottom of the rung. It's important to understand that. So the outcomes and the judgment of whether leaders have been successful or not, it cannot be judged outside the domain of the very subject of leadership called people. So have people made progress? Have people gone backward? The answer to that question lies around leadership. That is a very, very important point to understand. And when we talk about success in business, which is an organized effort of these factors of production towards a particular outcome, and that outcome is itself linked to people. So it is one thing to produce, it's quite another thing to produce the thing that people need. So if you produce the thing that people need and they will buy, again, we're back to the principle that says it's about people. So what you are doing, what you're organizing, how you do that, and what you're doing and why you are doing it is because there is people at the very end. So great leaders that I have come across and that have been the most impressive in my own career, in my own life, are the folks who understand that leadership is about people. So if we move to the second point, related to people is assumptions about people. So for better or for worse, your assumptions about people will color your brand of leadership and, more brutally, the results that you produce. So it is almost inescapable that when you come into a leadership position, you will have a predisposition about what people are. There are people who come into leadership and their predisposition is that people are lazy, for example. If that is your assumptions about people are lazy, you are probably going to have a hard time motivating them to produce, or even the brilliant ones and the diligent ones in the group will tend to gravitate toward being lazy over time because the leader who sets the lead actually assumes that people are lazy. I mean, there are no good or bad assumptions about people. The point I'm making here is that whether you succeed or you flop in leadership, it really depends on the assumptions that you make about people. And after the fact, when you try to characterize the brand of leadership that one has had, you can track it right back to the lens through which they see people. So the assumptions they have about people eventually color the leadership or the leadership brand. The third point is that it's about influence and is linked to the preceding 2 points. So the ability to move followers into action, not by force or coercion, but by eliciting their desire and conviction in the vision and the goal that you articulate, is called influence. Ladies and gentlemen, in the final analysis, you cannot force a human being to do anything. Human beings volunteer to do stuff. Now, if you are in an authoritative management position, for example, in your company, it's very easy to assume that you're powerful enough to force people to do things that they don't like. You can for a certain period of time, after which they will resign or leave, or they will get you fired. The greatest and purest form of leadership is the ability to elicit the desire and conviction of people to volunteer their effort to follow your goals, to follow your vision, and to work towards delivering your goals. John Maxwell says leadership is about influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's why whether you have the position or you don't, real leaders have a following because they have an influence. That is to say, they are able to elicit the desire and conviction of their followers to follow their goals, to follow their vision and their goals. So stop and evaluate from time to time what sort of influence you are having on people. And if you're in an organized organization, corporate organizations like I am, you needn't be influential in your own department or your own business. Real leaders have influence across the entire business. Real leaders, in my own experience, influence people long after they have had the direct interaction with them. I give you an example from my first career mentor, Nigel. Many years after Kingdom Bank actually shut down its doors and stuff, that guy still has such an influence in my life. That is the things I observed him do, the influence he had in my life then shaped a whole lot of what I became as a leader in my own right. And by extension, the people who follow me are directly impacted by what this guy did many years ago. So don't underestimate this power of influence. It's the be and all of leadership. So it is about influence. So you don't need the position necessarily to be influential. You can be influential in that place wherever you are in. So that's the first principle of leadership in general. If you're in doubt about who the leader is, stop. Forget about the hierarchy. Look at the guy who has the influence around people and around how people are behaving. That is the leader. So the next point I want to make is about how we measure human progress, or how we measure how a leader has been, whether it's been effective or not. Now, I've had a lot of, in my own experience, how people, we are so good at elaborating why things didn't work or won't work or will not work. We are so good at, trying to put, prescriptions about what effective leaders should do a priori before they produce. Now, the test of all that stuff, ladies and gentlemen, is in the eating. It's in what they eventually produce. So when I teach an MBA level, I usually say to my students, I will know that this university's MBA is effective when I actually visit wherever you guys work and whatever you do and actually see the results that you produce. Now, if there are no results, your MBA and whatever you have is probably not that effective. And I want you to be careful about this. So when there is all the hoo-ha about who's the great leader and who's that, just look at the results and what they produce. And that is an objective measure of how effective leadership has been. So we are all judged by what we produce. So there are arguments about who was the greatest president or who was the better president and blah, 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 blah. We can have a whole day of arguments. In the final analysis, leaders are judged by what they have produced. Look at the results. So as a leader in business, you can fake it for a period of time, but this you should know, that over time, people will look at what you've produced and judge you whether you've been effective or not. Whether you're CEO of a startup or CEO of a listed entity, it does not matter. What you produce is the measure of human progress. So that is a very important first principle to establish. The last one that I want to share with you, and is a very personal one, is that it is linked to the results, is that time is an arbiter between the argument of authenticity and being fake, all right? If you are in doubt, time is a good arbiter of whether somebody's been authentic or has had integrity or they were faking it. You can fake it for so long, but real leaders, authenticity and integrity stand the test of time. So whether you're in politics or in business, particularly in the business world, look, you can fake your promotion in the early years of your career for a period of time, but time will tell whether that was just smoke on screens or stuff that we should watch out for. So these are some of the first principles about leadership. And I think if I ended my talk here, I believe that it would be good enough. You can take some of this away to judge your own leadership journey and to be able to evaluate those around you, whether pretending or being real leaders, if they are being genuine. So these are the things that, a principle that I believe will help you to evaluate and make your own judgment about where you are in your leadership journey and where others are at, and those that you follow. If you great leaders develop others, it will help you to help develop those who are following you to be great leaders as well. So I hope this is making sense so far. And look, if you have any contribution, any question, again, I invite you to use the chat function to put that together. Now, let's just look at some of the business lessons that I've learned in leadership. And I've chosen to make them just 3 for obvious reasons. So usually you get a 21, a list of 21, a list of 10, a list of 12. That's okay. Today, I'm going to talk about 3. And if you can't remember 3, then there is very little hope for you. I'm kidding. But 3 is an easier number to remember than 12 or 17. So the first leadership lesson, and when I was listening to all the speakers before me, this is where they got me, is start with your why. Now, followers connect with your why. And we established earlier that customers don't buy your product. Customers buy the why behind the product. Now, there is a concept out there developed by one very great guy called Simon Sinek. It's called the Golden Circle. And I encourage people to read, this book. He put out a book actually that says, start with why. It's a very, very good book to read if you're going to succeed in leadership. And there is a TED Talk, an 18 minutes TED Talk that's out there as well that is put out on, starting with your why. Now, I just want to make a few points there around starting with the why, which is particularly in that video, the 18-minute video that it talks about. I'd encourage you, like I say, to read it. So he talks about the golden circle, and the golden circle has a why in the middle, the how, and then the what. And I'll share the link on the chat after my talk. So there's an important lesson to learn from there. So it's actually effect of biology, of how we are made up biologically as human beings. So the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain, is actually the more powerful and the bigger of our brain, how our brain is wired up. And based on the human brain and how we make decisions, people don't buy what you sell. People buy the why you are selling it. People buy what you believe and the cause behind it. Now, when it comes to leadership, people don't follow you because you were great, because you're amazing. Okay, you can be amazing and great for a period of time, but people generally follow folks with whom they identify their why. It is important to spend some time, and Simon Sinek uses in that video, in that TED talk, he talks about Apple and why we buy Apple products and why Apple has been so successful in an industry where there are other folks as well. We have equal access to resources and all this stuff. He talks about Martin Luther King Jr. and you look at his speech. We don't hear not so much about the what. This guy just says, I have a dream, and millions follow him. Not only in his lifetime, even today, we still have him inspire us. He talks about the Wright brothers and how they invented the aeroplane, and in comparison to the other folks that had access to better resources and better money, it is an important video to lead. Why were they successful? And it's very clear from his presentation that great leaders act and think and communicate the exact same way. And it's actually the opposite of how your regular folks communicate, because we normally communicate the what and not the why. So as a first leadership lesson of mine that I've learned in my journey is that the leaders that have made the greatest impression in my own career are those with whom I connect with at the why level, are those that I connect with at what they believe. So as an entrepreneur, I think I connected with my first boss. I connected with his why. That's why, okay, if I have time, I'll give you my story about how I broke my back to work for that business, gave my all voluntarily without being paid, and I still enjoyed it because the why is what was driving me. So the other leaders I've met in the legacy organization, there are others, by the way, who have sucked because I didn't quite connect with why they were doing what they were doing. But there have been some really great ones who have come with the great why. And once I connect to that, I find I give 120% of what I should give without expecting a payment. So great leaders start with the why, and followers, this is what you should know. If you have any bunch of followers, you have a bunch of people who believe in your why. If you don't have equally, it's because you probably don't have a why, or your why does not resonate with the people that you expect to follow you. That's a very important point to establish. And about 10 years or so ago, I read this book called Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela for the first time from cover to cover. And it made a lasting impression in my life. So I forgot about everything else, but the one thing that always stood out about Nelson Mandela is the Rivonia trial speech, if you guys remember it. If you don't remember, just go on and Google Rivonia trial speech Nelson Mandela. You will get the stuff that he said there. So he makes a point in his in court, and he states his why. And at the conclusion, the last sentence of that why, he says, "It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Now, 27 years in prison, believing the same thing is a long time, and we can have a separate conversation about Nelson Mandela. But why Nelson Mandela's statue is all over the place, and by the way, all over the world, and we still have people today who believe in this guy, it's because his why was that strong and clear. So the first leadership lesson I've learned about leading successfully is that be clear on the why and help your leaders to connect with it. By the way, not everybody will connect with it, but look for those who connect with it. And it's very, if you're going to have an inner circle in your own business, whether it's a startup or you're starting off a a function or leading a department in an enterprise, and you have the rights to fire and hire, be very clear when you get in there that the people that you lead actually connect with your why. If they don't, my advice is make sure that you have a way of showing them the exit door quickly, because they are going to detract from what you're trying to do and not help you move forward. So those that are going to help you and stick with you through thick and thin are the folks that connect with your why. So in the interest of time, the second lesson, let me move to the second lesson that I want to share with you here. And it's called, don't try to change the world. Change yourself. Don't try to boil the ocean. You probably are not going to succeed at it, even if you wanted it with good intentions. The person that you can change as a leader is you. And let's establish another first principle here. Even if you wanted to, and even if this person is your child, no human being can change another human being. The only person you can change is you. Now, that flips the power equation to you, because you have 100% control to the person that you are and can control. So I strongly encourage you to look at this, look at it from internally, and figure out very quickly that the only person that you can change is you. You can't change the world. This is significant because there is a nice meme that's out there that says, you know, one guy asked the crowd, who wants to change? And everybody raised their hands. And he asked, who wants to change? Who wants change? And everyone raised their hand. And who wants to change? And nobody wanted to change. It's been said many times, the statement by Martin Luther King Jr., that be the change that you want, or something similar. So this lesson is true in politics, it's true in every part of the world, it's also true in leadership. Be the change that you want to see. Change yourself if you're going to be a leader. I have a few thoughts to share with you around, changing to be the person that you want to be. So for example, your mind shift to focus on what other people can do. See, the other leaders who believe that they're the end of all and everything circles around them. If you're going to be successful, by the way, as a leader, the less you do, the more you get done. And that is nothing to do with the people you follow, but everything to do with you. So if you're the focus and wanting to be the star of the show, change. That is well within your control. Focus on what others can do. The other important thing about, changing yourself is, if you suck at building relationships, you are not going to do much in leadership. And that is 100% within your control. Work to develop good relationships with people. And here's the lesson. Expect people to be like themselves, not like you. I said earlier, you are not going to change people even if you like to. Even if you wanted to change your child, you're not going to be successful. And it's a helpful expectation to expect people to be more like themselves and not like you. And that is a mind shift, a mindset shift that you only can achieve in your own life. So the other thing that you can do to change yourself is learn to communicate and learn to describe results. I talked about results earlier, and my own personal brand of leadership is centered on results. Learn to describe results and not activities. Communicate these very, very clearly to the people that follow you. So often we communicate activities, and I hope we have over 18s here, and I always liken that to pornography, to say the very exercise, natural outcome expected from a mating of a female and a male is a child, unless if it's pornography. So if you have been busy and there is no outcome at the end of 9 months, you are indistinguishable from an exercise in pornography. Similarly, as leaders, we can be very busy, especially in the business world. But when it comes to the year end, as a shareholder, as a stakeholder, I'm looking at outcomes. So spend time to learn to describe results to your people and to communicate this effectively. So in the interest of time, we could have gone on and on to describe what folks to do and why we need to focus on results. Jim Rohn says, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. So again, that shifts the power equation to you. The world is not going to be what you want or what you theorize it to be. It is what it is. For you to get more out of it, you just got to get better. Again, focus on yourself, change yourself, and not the world. So the last and third lesson that I want to share with you is a subject that I'm actually learning a lot about as I'm reading the book WTF by a good Silicon Valley intellectual called Tim O'Reilly. Unleash the power of what I call cognitive surplus. Now, if you look at the most successful companies in the world at the moment, just go and look at the Dow and who is making, which companies have had the most gains in their stock prices recently, you see that is the tech companies. Let's take Facebook, for example, and ask yourself, who actually creates content for Facebook? It is you and I who post stuff there because they recognize a concept called cognitive surplus. That is, there is so many more people out there than you can ever hire in your company that are capable of creating content for Facebook than any army of engineers and folks that they can hire. It's a very important point. Applied generally everywhere. So let's talk about a few things. Companies have been trying this concept of called open innovation. You can innovate internally, that's okay, but the best companies in the world have open innovation platforms. That is, they open to co-create solutions with their customers and other stakeholders outside them. Now, successful leaders in this modern era, I believe, are those that will be very careful about how they engineer their business models to begin to co-create solutions with the customers and with the people that are not necessarily within their employ or in their following. So we can talk about open innovation in a different webinar. It's a massive subject. There's a concept of shared value, which is speaking to the ESG and you know how companies are contributing to the to climate and all these other related things. And if you actually, there are studies in motion right now that are beginning to demonstrate that companies that demonstrate shared value out there actually make the greater progress from a stock price point of view and even the sales and top line and bottom line measures. So the concept of shared value again taps into the cognitive surplus that is out there that you can tap in to grow as a business. And there is another concept called open source, whether it's open source software or it's open source learning. And some of the greatest programs and things that we have, guys, are open source. Think of Wikipedia. There is no single author of Wikipedia. If you're going to search anything in Wikipedia today, it's been contributed by thousands of people around the world. Okay, if you're going to look at Facebook, your Facebook timeline and you know the content in there, whether it's Twitter or on Facebook, it's been contributed by thousands of folks out there. If you're into programming and you're looking using packages like R, it's itself an open source programming language, which has contributors from all over the world. So this concept is really taking root. I believe the next new chapter of the world economy is going to be shaped around the concept of open source and just the idea of tapping to the cognitive surplus that is out there from people that we serve as customers or otherwise. There is also the concept of human-centered design. Again, this requires a webinar on its own. So human-centered design says we cannot just create a product, and all the tech products that you see that from time to time, an app on your phone, you have to rate it, you have to give your comments, and there are algorithms that are pulling all that data and feeding it back to the folks who are actually creating the algorithms to improve on them going forward. So the Google search engine, for example, learns from you every day, and the input that you give it every day, the ratings that you give it every day. It's because they need to design that and continually update that app or that algorithm to behave in a way that serves the interests of the people that it seeks to serve. Now, this is a superior leadership lesson for people who are leading in the current century. We need to adapt to tap into the cognitive surplus that is out there. There's a quote that is out there by Tim O'Reilly, like I indicated earlier, and it was a pinned tweet in my account for a very long time. And he says, "This is my faith in humanity, that we can rise to great challenges. Moral choice, not intelligence or creativity, is our greatest asset. Things may get much worse before they get better, but we can choose instead to lift each other up, to build an economy where people matter, not just profit. We can dream big dreams and solve big problems. Instead of using technology to replace people, we can use it to augment them so that they can do things that were previously impossible." So if you look at your Uber app and how Uber works, that is a perfect example of how technology augments drivers, of how technology augments people who need transport from point A to point B. So that's an important leadership lesson, and I cannot do justice for it in the next few minutes. But in general, in conclusion on this point, people will support what they help create. It is important as leaders in this century, whether an entrepreneur or in business, in corporate like I am, to understand that people will support what they help create. Finally, some useful references. I've already spoken about a few books there. Start with Why, WTF by Tim O'Reilly, 21 Laws of Leadership by Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, and finally, Change by Design by Tim Brown. Let me conclude by a favorite statement of mine. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to folks with talent. Ladies and gentlemen, if a man has talent and does not use it, he has failed. End of discussion. If his talent and only uses half of it, he has partially failed. And if his talent and learns to use the whole of it, is gloriously succeeded and knows a satisfaction no triumph will ever know. I hope that these thoughts inspire you to go out there and change your country, change our continent, because it requires leadership. Thank you very much, Mr. Host. I will end it here and attend to some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Xolani. I am so bummed that I didn't get to introduce you. My internet was acting up, but thank you so much for that. It's amazing how the whole time you were speaking, it was as if you were talking to me directly, because one promise I made to myself this year was I was going to be a better leader, a better boss, a better person to people who work for me. So thank you so much. I will take this time to address or to pose, for you to pose any questions that you may have for Dr. Xolani. You can send your questions in the chat box and he can attend to those. Any questions, or he was very, very clear about what he was talking about? There's a question from Flora loading. We'll wait for that questions whilst others are still typing out their questions. And I would like for you to, I'd like to inform you rather that the next session will be at 2 p.m. So we've got an hour break before our next session. And we have a question from Losisa. And the question is, Dr. X, what is the biggest challenge you have faced in your leadership journey and how did you overcome it?
Pretty difficult. I've faced a few of those. I'm not too sure if I can nail one of the biggest, but I think the first one is the biggest one that comes to mind is one that required more or less a moral choice. So where I needed to let a very nice member of my team go home because while they were very busy, the results I was looking for were not there. So painful as it was, we had to get the HR process started because, yeah, they had a very lengthy scorecard, laden with activities of what they were doing as a busybody the whole year, but there was no results at the end of the year. So the point I was making about results, I had to I mean, painfully, as nice as they were, show them the exit door. It was difficult because I like them as a person, but they're just not producing. I hope that answers your question.
Wow, that's a difficult one. And I think I'm taking notes from you as well, because results are really important when you're running a business. And I will rush to the next question, which is from Flora Kurasha. And she asks, how do we handle negative influences in departments that we are leading? I'm assuming she's working for a company or in corporate, and she would like to know, how do you handle negative influences?
That's a very good question, Flora. So first of all, we're back to the first principles story around influence. And the fact that when human beings decide to follow, it's actually an act in voluntarism. They volunteer to follow a particular belief system or particular influence from anybody. And if we're back to the point that we said about changing yourself, the power is in your hands, right? You cannot change who they are. You cannot change the influences that they have on you. But the one thing you have 100% control over is whether you choose to follow them or not. So my point here, my short answer will be, seize your power. You might need to change certain things about you, and that is 100% within your control. So negativity is out there. We cannot wish it away. But one cannot influence you negatively without your cooperation. So stop cooperating with them. That would be my short answer. Thanks.
Thank you for that response. And you keep on going to your point where you were reiterating that we only have control of our own actions or what we do, not the other person's. Thank you for that. And the next question is from Simpiwe Zuma. And her question is, how do you keep yourself and those you lead motivated and inspired, navigating uncertainties, particularly during these times of a global pandemic?
Difficult questions, Impira, and there's a lot of research that's going around at the moment, from thought leaders in business, consulting houses, and if you follow McKinsey, they always, put these out all the time. And I've been immersed in some of them, and our own experience as a business, we have had to think deeply about how we keep our people interested and motivated. If I were to summarize it, it comes down to one thing that, and if the pandemic has shown us anything, is that we are human beings. First and foremost, before the title, before the business plan in front of us, we are first of all human beings. And there is one innate need that we all are craving for, is because we need to know whether by perceived or real that we are being cared for. And there's a famous quote out there by Maya Angelou where she says, people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I think all the leaders through this pandemic, it's important to be mindful of how what we're doing is making people feel. And I think we will err the right way when we err on the side of making people feel that they're being cared for. I don't think there is too much we can do to motivate them to do more than, first of all, to know that as a leader, whether you are leading them as one person or as a company, that you are actually doing everything to care for them. So I would pause it there, Trish, and say, yes, you can do everything else, but for now, whatever you're doing, the sum total of it has to be making people feel that they're being cared for. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. And it also pointed back to what you were sharing on human-centered design, a new word that I learned today. So probably we can use that as well with our employees. We are trying to ensure that they're motivated when they're at work. And there's a question from Liberty, and this is a question that I was also hoping to ask, because I left my job hoping to change the world. And Liberty is also saying that in one of your points, you said one should rather change themselves rather than change the world. Does this apply to leaders like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, etc.? Because if we look at it, they never changed but believed their dream till the world changed. Please explain a bit more.
Very good observation there, Liberty. I think in one of the WhatsApp groups that I'm in, somebody posted yesterday some excerpts of quotations by some business leaders around their attitude towards MBAs. So Elon Musk, for example, is on song for rubbishing MBAs, saying don't hire MBAs. And there was a couple of other top folks like the Alibaba guy. And my response to them was, beware of single interpretations of statements, and especially the people that purvey them. To be very honest, while we caught these leaders in these things that they said in books or in some of the quotations, we don't know enough about their personal experiences. Certainly, Nelson Mandela's book, Life, cannot be codified in some finite pages of a book. So we don't know enough about, what they did or did not do. But my own opinion, and I emphasize that is my own opinion, is that for them to do the things that they eventually did, there had to be a lot of change that they went through, a metamorphosis that they went through as individuals to be the leaders that they became and to achieve the things that they did. And by the way, when I say change yourself, I'm not saying that don't attempt to change the world, but there is a method to that, which Dr. Martin Luther King said himself, that be the change that you want to see. If you change yourself, there is hope that we can change the world. Because if you change yourself and the next person changes themselves to what we're trying to achieve, there is hope that collectively we can change the world. So that's just a process question. So we don't know enough for me to comment intelligently about what their lives were in their boyhood or through their marriages. But I would imagine that their experiences changed them to be the people and the leaders that they became later in their lives. I hope that answers some of your questions, Liberty, and I'm happy to engage offline after this call. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response, Dr. X. And I'm just going to ask our audience to indulge us for a few more minutes, maybe 3 minutes, to just address the last question before we hand over to Uno for his final remarks. So please bear with us. We just want to ask the question from Ishe Anesu, which is, how do you shift your mindset from activity-driven leadership to results-oriented leadership? What is the most important thing to do to be focused on results instead of activity?
Very important question, Isha. And I cannot pretend that I can give you a complete answer, in the next minute or two. And I'm happy to engage with you afterwards. So, but if I have learned anything from the organizations that I work for, they have a performance management system. And I remember at some point in my life, actually writing a dissertation on why I thought performance management systems were a waste of time. And if performance management systems in organizations, by the way, you need it as a startup. If you have a startup, you need a performance management system. If you have people following you, even more,
looks like
require proper performance management. Now, as a leader, that performance management system is your good shot at industrializing and generalizing certain behaviors. Now, there are certain things that drive that sort of behavior. The first one is that your performance management system then has to be linked to your reward system. So people will generally shape their behavior and culture around what you reward or punish, right? So the thing that you reward, if you reward activity and punish for results, for example, That is what you're going to get in your company. You have people focused on activities because your reward system and performance management system rewards for activity. But if your performance management system is aligned to a reward system that says, we will reward you for results. For example, how do you determine who get what bonus at the end of the year? So if the bonus is given to folks that produce results, the tendency is that you will then tend to propagate that behavior of having people focus on results because that's what you reward. If your punishment system punishes people for producing results and not necessarily activity, again, the effect is that generally you're going to get people focusing on activities because they're afraid to produce. So I would say, in short, if you are in by the way, it doesn't matter whether you are in JCI, a voluntary organization, or a profit entity, a startup. If you have people following you, make sure that the performance management and how you judge performance management and how you reward or punish lack of it is aligned to the result that you're aiming for. If we reward and celebrate results, you generally will tend to have people focus on producing results. My own experience in JCI and leading voluntary organizations is the same. Whether or not you're making profits, there are things we do like, those awards we do at the end of the year or recognition of the most outstanding member and stuff like that. It's seldom to me about activity. It's about what they produced. And once you perpetuate that and institutionalize it in your company or an organization, you begin to see that people align to the things that you actually reward or punish for. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. X. And I really hope that all that you've shared today is in a book somewhere that you end up putting on the resources page of your next presentation. Thank you so much. We learned a lot. And I'd like to invite Coach Uno to come through and just share his final remarks before we close.
Thank you very much, Trish, and thank you very much, Dr. X, for the nuggets that you've shared. Now, one thing I enjoy about your presentations is that we may be coming from a high motivational talk, and then you just come in with this seriousness that just says, hey, everybody, just listen, the facts are coming now. And you don't want to leave when you are talking because you want to reflect. So you really speak in a way that makes us reflect and think we want to do more. And certainly that has happened for me, and I'm sure it has happened for so many of us who are on this call. So thank you so much for giving your time. I know that you prepared for this, and I know that it carries so much value for us. So thank you, my brother, for giving your time to this. I really appreciate it, and definitely words will not say enough of how much we are thanking you for that which you have done. Now, I also want to talk about the coming, or maybe you want to respond first before I then announce the things happening next.
Well, thank you very much, my brother Uno. Thanks everyone for having me. I hope we can interact after this session. I'm keen to learn from your own experiences as well. Thank you once again. Cheers.
Yeah, and before you go, I know that there's a photo moment that we'll be looking for here. T, would you want to lead us in that? And then we can go on to the next. And as we prepare for that photo, I just want to tell you that 2 o'clock is Yamela Dali. 3 is Eric Schlenker. You don't want to miss that session that we have in the afternoon. We've got, hey, it's loaded. We've got Tafadzwa, Betesasa coming through talking about starting from where you are. And we've got Francis Mwale teaching also about lessons that he's learned from the corporate world. So you don't want to miss that as well. Please do come through and we can have that happening. Is T here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello. Hey, hello everyone. I'm back to my tender. As you guys know from yesterday, I got the tender to take the pictures. So please switch on your videos and let's take a picture together. All right. Dr. So amazing this morning, this afternoon rather. And I want us to just thank him by saying, Dr. X.
Dr. X.
All right. Hold those smiles for me. Say success.
Success.
Yeah, that's what we want, right? We're here to learn how to lead towards business success. Thank you so much, everyone. That's it for the picture moment for now.
Thank you, Trish.
Yes, I am still here. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this session. Wow, I don't know if I'm going to eat lunch. Busy digesting his words instead of my food. But thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you at 2 p.m. for the next session. And thank you so much, Coach Uno, for creating this platform that is amazing, full of a wealth of knowledge. So I look forward to seeing you after lunch, and this is goodbye for now.